With more than 200 million Americans planning for summer vacation, the travel nightmares are just beginning. In this week's Wake Up Washington, in swoops the Department of Transportation with new rules they say will hold airlines more accountable, specifically when it comes to refunds for cancellations, significant delays, and even delayed luggage.
In theory, passengers are already supposed to be refunded for a cancellation or a major delay. In practice, it often doesn't work that way. This isn't just about enforcing when something goes wrong, it's making it less likely something would go wrong.
The rules announced by the Biden-Harris administration significantly expand consumer protections in air travel that not only make the refund path easier, but will also save passengers over $500 million in hidden and surprise junk fees. But now a coalition of airlines, including Delta, American, United, and JetBlue, are suing the administration, calling the new rules an overreach. But should the rules go into effect, will any of this really make an impact on the horror stories Americans are facing in the not-so-friendly skies these days? Travelers across the country have been speaking out, and the list of complaints is long and varied.
I didn't know that they were offering refunds. I just got a free $15 meal credit on a flight that was delayed 2 hours.
We've been delayed since Monday, and it's now Wednesday.
I'm getting ready to board, and they said your flight is canceled, and there are no other flights.
My flight was 3.5 hours delayed.
You may have to sleep over in airport, who knows?
No, we were on the plane for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And didn't go anywhere?
No, we were on the tarmac.
No, then the flight was canceled.
They did lose a luggage on their way out here.
Unfortunately, now in this day and age, you kind of come to expect it.
Joining us now to make some sense of all the sky-high nonsense is NewsNation's travel editor, Peter Greenberg. Peter, thank you so much for joining me here today. You know, the new airline regulations will soon be required to automatically refund travelers if they cancel, delay, or make major changes to their flights. They've always been required to do that, so what's exactly changed here?
What's changed here is that they're being forced to actually disclose it. In the past, the rule was very simple. If the airline cancels your flight for any reason whatsoever, you're entitled to an immediate refund back to your original form of purchase. But during the pandemic, what did a lot of airlines do? They didn't volunteer that information. They gave people vouchers or future flight credits with expiration dates. It was like the draconian gift card. And that cost a lot of people a lot of money that they never saw again. So what the DOT is doing right now is they're reinstituting the rule with some additional provisions so that if your domestic flight is delayed by more than 3 hours, you get an automatic cash refund. If you're delayed by more than 6 hours on an international flight, you get the same automatic refund. But then they've gone beyond that with some additional rules. And that gets down into full transparency and full disclosure. And that's what gets down to about the pricing of your flight. When you go online to make a reservation, even today, you may see a fare that's quoted that looks very attractive, but what they're not disclosing is all the other hidden fees that you may be required to pay, whether it's baggage or ticket change fees, a whole realm of things. And what the DOT is suggesting in a new rule is that the airlines have to actually display those prices and those fees in the same position and at the same time that you're looking at that fare. You mentioned the lawsuit.
Right.
They're basically saying, oh, we can't do that because if we do that, it will just be confusing to passengers. It will inundate them with overwhelming amount of information. If it's going to save us $500 million a year, my response is, please inundate me. I'll be confused. It'll be fine. Look, we need to know what we're going to pay.
So, Peter, what are the hidden and surprise fees we keep hearing about with these airlines, and how will they be curbed under this guidance?
Well, remember, without financial consequences for bad behavior, the behavior continues. Mm-hmm. You may remember the tarmac delay rule. That was actually instituted about 12 years ago. And what it said was, after so many bad incidents, that if an airline pushes back from the gate with you on the plane, and they keep you on that plane on the tarmac for more than 3 hours without returning you to the gate, the airline is subject to a fine of up to $27,500 per passenger, not per incident. So on a fully loaded 737, you're talking seven figures. How many tarmac delay rules have been applied in the 12 years that it's been instituted? About 3, maybe 4. So the financial consequences have had a deterrent effect, and the airlines have behaved well. That's what has to be done here. It's not a question of coming up with a rule. It's about coming up with the consequences, and that's what's being debated now.
So we mentioned earlier a coalition of major airlines like American and Delta are now suing the administration specifically over the new rule regarding these hidden fees. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg reacted to the suit Tuesday in a social media post saying that he was, quote unquote, speechless. Why are airlines pushing back on this?
Well, it's interesting because of the money. Airlines make more money in many cases from their ancillary fees than they make from the actual airline ticket or flying the planes. And the reason, there's an irony to this lawsuit. You mentioned American, United, and Delta and JetBlue suing the DOT. What's the one airline that didn't sue them? Southwest. They're the only airline that doesn't charge you to check bags. That should tell you everything. But the underlying reason why the airlines are pushing back on this now is because they're beginning to fear the possibility of re-regulation. Right? We haven't had that since 1978. That's when the Airline Deregulation Act came into effect, and it took the government out of pricing, out of routes, out of frequencies, et cetera. And that turned out to be a pretty good thing for consumers. It opened up travel to a lot of people. I'm old enough to remember when there were only 3 airfares in America: first, coach, and night coach. Now there are like 34 to 40 different fares on any one different flight. People have more choice. But what the airlines are worried about now is that if the DOT rule comes into effect, the DOT may make other rules that legislative bodies may not be able to make under the 1978 law. That's what they're worried about.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. After a number of safety incidents on Boeing airplanes, the Department of Justice is now considering charges for the aircraft manufacturer. Peter, should travelers feel safe on Boeing planes? And do you think this is going to affect summer travel at all?
Well, first of all, let's talk about some numbers here. We just celebrated the 30 safest years in commercial aviation since commercial aviation began. And when I get on a plane, I have to figure out if the pilot's happy, I'm going to be happy. So that's the first thing. Let's talk about some other numbers. Last year, 31 million flights in 2023. How many fatal accidents? 1 in Nepal back in January of 2023. I'll take those odds any day of the week. But there's a deeper issue here. We can talk all day long about the great record of aviation safety, but that's not the issue. The issue is, can we maintain it? And based on the behavior of the FAA with other manufacturers and operators, and especially their behavior with Boeing, that calls it into question whether we can maintain it. That's why there's a DOT probe, there's a U.S. National Transportation and Safety Board probe, there's the Justice Department probe, and a recent probe by the FAA on the Boeing 787. These are necessary and essential to getting us back on track to a safety culture.
That perspective is obviously very important. So some airlines in other countries are looking at adult-only seating areas on planes with special areas for parents traveling with children. I'm from Orlando. There's always kids on my plane going to the parks when I go home. So this sounds interesting. Do you think this will even work in the U.S. going forward?
Actually, they need to do it a different way. One for adults and one for adults who act like children. Once you do that, we're okay. Because the incidents that we're seeing on planes today are still way too high in terms of people acting out and becoming violent and disruptive. The real issue here is whether families can be able to sit together without paying a surcharge. And that is now part of the new DOT rules, allowing families to be able to sit together without having to pay for an upsell seat. That, I think, is a significant change. And then if they can basically segment out those areas on the plane, it'll be a little bit better. But to have a completely separate section, I don't think it's going to be practical.
I want to talk weather. It's hard to make sense of some delays and cancellations, especially when you're about to take off on your flight and it's a completely sunny day with no cloud in the sky at your departing location. So do you have any expert tips on checking the weather before flying, and what should we be doing in this case?
Well, here's the deal. It's not about the weather where you are. It's about the weather where the plane is coming from to get you. So there are a lot of great apps out there now called FlightAware or Flight Radar 24 that can actually track your incoming flight to see if it's even left. Because you look out the window and it's a beautiful sunny day, as you just said. Where's my plane? Why are we delayed? Why are we canceled? That may be the reason. And that gives you a head start of maybe 2 to 3 hours to make other plans, especially if the weather is not where you are and you want to be able to get a plan B together. That's the way to do it. But remember, it's not about the weather necessarily where you are. It's where is that plane coming from and where are the delays there. And that's easy now to get with those apps.
Definitely a good tip to know. Finally, there's the age-old travel question in terms of air travel: to check or not to check. There's obviously not a lot of baggage room inside planes these days. What's your best advice on getting your luggage to your destination on time and really intact?
Well, one of my favorite sayings is there are only two kinds of airline bags: carry-on and lost. I'll let you laugh, but now we'll move on forward and talk about something more serious. Who lost and misplaced and mishandled the most bags last year? That would be United Airlines. They were followed by American Airlines. And by the way, look at that. Guess who had the best record of the major airlines? Here's the irony again. Southwest Airlines, the only airline that doesn't charge you to check your bags. So there's something wrong with the system here. And the other real problem is it's not just your check-in bags. In many cases, it can be your carry-on bags that can't fit in the plane because they've added so many seats on the plane that they're going to have to be gate checked. It's a mess. And this summer, with more people traveling than ever before, you know what? Go back to my idea of carry-on and lost and get on try to be in that first boarding group. You need that overhead space because if they have to gate check your bag, you've accomplished nothing.
Yeah, I feel like it's the Hunger Games, airline, gates getting into that first boarding group. Peter Greenberg, thank you so much for your advice and wisdom on this topic. We really appreciate it.
You got it.